Ada for considering reporting my neighbor's messy property. My name is Gail, and my wife, Maisie, and I have lived in our quiet cul-de-sac for 12 years. When we first bought our house, we fell in love with this neighborhood. It's the kind of place where people wave as they drive by, kids ride their bikes in the evenings, and every lawn is neatly trimmed. The air feels lighter here, safe and predictable, or at least it used to. Over the years, we've gotten to know almost all of our neighbors. Some have become close friends, like June and her husband across the street. Others we're not as close to, but there's always been mutual respect. That's why the situation with the house next door has been eating at me, bit by bit, until it's all I can think about. Next door lives a mother and daughter, Alana and her daughter Shiloh. They moved in about 8 years ago. In the beginning, they seemed perfectly fine, just a little quiet. Alana was polite, though she kept conversations short, while Shiloh was friendlier, always giving a quick wave whenever she passed by. But over time, things changed. It started small, a patch of overgrown grass here, a cracked fence post there. Nothing serious, just little things that could easily be fixed. But instead of improving, the problems multiplied. Their fence now leans dangerously to one side, ready to collapse at any moment. The paint on their house has peeled so badly that you can see the gray wood beneath, making the place look abandoned. And then there's the pool in their backyard. When they first moved in, Shiloh mentioned they wanted to fix it up, but they never did. It's been covered for at least 6 years, the tarp shredded by weather and age. Now, the whole thing looks like a breeding ground for mosquitoes, and maybe worse. Shiloh is in her late 20s now, perfectly capable of handling the upkeep, as far as I know. Alana, on the other hand, has some kind of mobility issue. She's in her early 60s and rarely leaves the house. I've never been told exactly what her condition is, but from the way she moves, slowly, carefully, it's clear that physical labor is difficult for her. Shiloh does most of the work around their house, though work might be too generous a word. Every few weeks, she'll mow the front yard or trim a few bushes, but it's never enough. Their backyard is so overgrown, it looks like a small forest compared to everyone else's neat, manicured lawns. At first, I let it slide. Everyone has struggles, and I didn't want to be the kind of neighbor who nitpicks. But as the years went on, their house became a glaring eyesore. When we host family gatherings or barbecues, I catch guests glancing toward their yard, eyebrows raised. Maisie always nudges me, whispering, "Don't say anything, Gail," but I can't help the knot of embarrassment twisting in my stomach. For years, I've quietly suspected they might be hoarders. Their windows are always covered, blinds drawn tight no matter the weather. I've never seen anyone besides Shiloh go in or out. Even when Shiloh brings in groceries, she moves quickly, almost secretively, disappearing inside before anyone has a chance to say hello. Maisie says I'm overthinking it, but I can't shake the feeling that something's very wrong in there. Then, last week, something happened that made my suspicions skyrocket. A huge dumpster appeared in their driveway. At first, I felt relieved. Maybe they were finally planning to renovate. I even imagined fresh paint on their house, the fence repaired, the yard cleared. But that relief was short-lived. No workers ever came. No repair trucks, no sign of construction. Just Shiloh, day after day, carrying endless bags and boxes out of the garage and tossing them into the dumpster. From my porch, I watched as she heaved broken furniture, overflowing boxes, and appliances into the bin. It wasn't like when someone clears out a garage for a yard sale. This was different, desperate, almost frantic. I tried to look away, but it was impossible. It was like watching a slow-motion disaster. Maisie noticed too, though she tried to downplay it. "She's probably just spring cleaning," she said, though it was the middle of fall. "Maisie," I said, lowering my voice, "that dumpster is nearly full already, and I've seen her bring out at least 5 old TVs. Who has 5 TVs in their house unless there's something wrong?" Maisie frowned, but didn't respond. She hates confrontation and would rather ignore a problem than get involved. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. If they've been hoarding inside that house for years, it could be dangerous. Fire hazards, pests, not to mention the way it drags down our whole street. The situation boiled over 3 nights ago. I was sitting on the porch when Shiloh came outside carrying a heavy black trash bag. She looked exhausted, her hair sticking to her face with sweat. She stumbled, and the bag ripped open, spilling its contents across the driveway. Even from a distance, I could see the mess: stacks of yellowed newspapers, piles of clothing, and what looked like rusted metal tools. Shiloh froze, looking around wildly, then frantically shoved everything back into the bag. She glanced toward our house, her eyes meeting mine for a brief, tense moment. Her expression wasn't anger, it was fear. The next morning, Maisie found a dead rat near our flower bed. I couldn't help but think about that ripped trash bag. Now, my mind won't stop racing. Should I report them to the homeowners association? Or even the county? What if there's a serious infestation or a fire risk? Maisie thinks I'd be overstepping. "They've never caused us trouble directly," she argued last night. "If you report them, you'll be labeled as the bad guy. You don't know what they're going through." But that's just it, I don't know. And the not knowing is driving me crazy. Things between Maisie and me have been tense, too. She hates how obsessed I've become, constantly glancing out the window or pacing by the fence. Last night, we had a huge fight. "You're acting like some kind of spy," she snapped. They're our neighbors, Gail, not criminals. They might be endangering everyone on this street. I shot back. What if there's mold? Or a fire hazard? Or what? Maisie interrupted, her voice sharp. You don't know. You're making assumptions based on what you think you see. We went to bed without speaking. The guilt and frustration are eating me alive. On one hand, I don't want to ruin Alana and Shiloh's lives. On the other, I can't ignore the way our neighborhood feels like it's decaying, starting with that house. Last night, as I stood on the porch, I saw something that pushed me even closer to the edge. Shiloh was outside again, this time whispering urgently into her phone. I couldn't hear her words, but her body language said everything. Frantic gestures, hands clutching her head, pacing in tight circles. Then, suddenly, she screamed. It was raw and guttural, the kind of sound that makes your blood run cold. Alana appeared in the doorway, shouting something I couldn't make out. Shiloh threw her phone to the ground and stormed back inside. The door slammed, and the house went silent again. Maisie came outside, pale and shaken. Gail, she whispered, please, just leave it alone. Whatever's happening over there, it's not our business. But I don't think I can. This morning, I noticed the dumpster was almost completely full, towering piles of junk spilling over the edges. The sight of it made my chest tighten. If I don't act soon, I'm afraid something terrible will happen, whether to them, to us, or to the whole neighborhood. I don't want to be heartless, but I also don't want to be the neighbor who stayed silent while everything fell apart. A few days after I first posted, everything spiraled into chaos faster than I could have ever imagined. It was Saturday morning, and Maisie and I were just sitting down for breakfast when a sharp, panicked voice echoed through the quiet street. It was so loud it cut through the usual weekend calm. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth, and Maisie immediately looked worried. That's coming from next door, I muttered, already pushing my chair back. When I peeked through the blinds, my chest tightened. Shiloh was standing in the driveway beside the overflowing dumpster, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. She was pacing wildly, her voice hoarse as she yelled into the phone. You can't just disappear on me like this, she screamed. We need help. I need you. Her words were raw, desperate. A second later, she threw her free hand over her face, shaking her head violently before abruptly hanging up. At the front door, Alana appeared. She gripped the frame with both hands, looking pale and fragile, like she might collapse at any moment. She was crying but silent, just standing there, staring at her daughter with a kind of helpless sorrow that made my stomach twist. Maisie rushed up behind me, her voice sharp with worry. Gail, don't get involved, she hissed, tugging at my arm. But I couldn't look away. For several minutes, Shiloh just stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the ground. Then, out of nowhere, a rusted green pickup truck came barreling down the street and screeched to a stop in their driveway. The sudden noise jolted everyone, and I swear I saw Alana flinch. A man I'd never seen before jumped out, tall, broad-shouldered, with a face flushed red, whether from anger or exertion, I couldn't tell. Later, I would learn his name was Roman, Alana's estranged brother. But in that moment, all I knew was that his arrival turned everything volatile. Shiloh spun around and immediately started screaming at him. You said you'd help us, she shouted, her voice cracking. Where were you, Roman? Where have you been? Roman didn't back down. He stomped toward her, jabbing his finger in the air. I told you I'd try. I have my own problems, Shiloh. You think you're the only one drowning here. Their voices grew louder, sharper, cutting through the air like knives. One by one, neighbors emerged from their houses. June and her husband peeked over their fence. A family walking their dog stopped mid-step. The whole cul-de-sac turned into an audience for a family implosion. Maisie grabbed my arm again, whispering urgently, stay out of it, Gail, please. But my heart was pounding. I'd never seen Shiloh so unhinged, and the sight of Alana trembling at the doorway made me want to run over and shield her somehow. Then, things escalated further. Shiloh took a step closer to Roman, her face twisted with rage. You abandoned us after Dad died. You left me to take care of everything, and now you show up just to yell at me. Alana suddenly screamed, stop it. Both of you stop. But neither of them listened. Roman snarled back, don't you dare put this all on me. I told you years ago Mom needed help. You were too proud to admit it. That's when Shiloh snapped. She shoved Roman hard in the chest, and he stumbled backward, nearly falling into the street. The crowd gasped. Maisie clapped a hand over her mouth. Roman's face turned dark, and for a terrifying second, I thought he might hit her. But instead, he just shouted, this was a mistake. Then he stormed back to his truck, slammed the door so hard it rattled, and sped away, tires screeching. Shiloh crumpled to her knees in the driveway, sobbing so loudly it made my throat ache. Alana rushed to her, but even from my porch, I could see how frail she was. She crouched beside her daughter, whispering something I couldn't hear. After a minute, she helped Shiloh back inside, the door closing behind them with a heavy, final thud. The neighborhood stood frozen for a moment, no one daring to move. Then, slowly, everyone drifted away, pretending like they hadn't just witnessed a meltdown. Maisie and I went back inside, both of us shaken. I couldn't stop pacing. What the hell just happened? I muttered. Maisie rubbed her temples. Gail, please, don't get wrapped up in this. It's clearly family stuff. Just leave them alone. But I couldn't. I needed to understand. Later that afternoon, Maisie got a Facebook message from June. June, the neighbor 2 houses down. June had always been more observant than most and had actually spoken with Shiloh a few times over the years. Maisie read the message aloud, and with every word, my heart sank. According to June, Alana had been suffering from severe depression ever since her husband, Shiloh's father, died unexpectedly years ago. After his death, she'd stopped leaving the house almost entirely. Over time, clutter began piling up inside. At first, it was just neglected chores, but eventually, it spiraled into full-blown hoarding. Shiloh, desperate to keep things under control, had taken on the impossible task of caring for both her mother and their crumbling home. She'd been trying to clean up before anyone reported them or before the HOA fined them, but the problem was far bigger than she could handle alone. Roman, the man we'd seen earlier, was Alana's brother. He had promised to help with the cleanup, but according to June, he'd been unreliable for years. This time, he'd bailed on them at the last minute, leaving Shiloh feeling betrayed and utterly overwhelmed. When Maisie finished reading, guilt slammed into me like a freight train. All those nights I'd sat on the porch, glaring at their messy yard, building this narrative in my head about laziness and neglect. I'd been so wrong. They weren't careless. They were drowning. Maisie saw the look on my face and touched my arm gently. "You see now why we shouldn't judge?" she said softly. I just nodded, unable to speak. The next morning, I saw Shiloh outside again, sitting on the porch steps. She looked completely drained, like she hadn't slept in days. Maisie begged me not to go over, but I couldn't ignore her anymore. Against her advice, I walked across the lawn and crouched down a few feet away. "Shiloh," I said quietly, "are you okay?" At first, she didn't answer. Then, slowly, she lifted her head. Her eyes were red and swollen, and her voice trembled when she spoke. "I'm not okay," she whispered. "I've been trying so hard, Gail. I thought if I could just get the house clean before anyone noticed, we'd be safe. But it's too much. I can't do it alone anymore." Hearing her words broke something in me. All my anger, my judgment, it vanished. In its place was a deep, aching sympathy. "You don't have to do it alone," I said firmly. "Let me help." At first, she resisted, shaking her head. "No, if anyone sees the inside of the house, they'll report us. Mom will lose everything." But I kept talking, gently reassuring her. Eventually, she broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "Please," she choked out, "just don't tell anyone how bad it is." I promised her I wouldn't. Over the next few days, I rallied some of the neighbors, including June and a couple others, and we quietly started helping. At first, it was just the outside, hauling away the endless piles of junk filling the dumpster, trimming back the wild, overgrown yard, repainting the broken fence. As the days passed, something incredible happened. People who had once whispered about Alana and Shiloh's house came forward with kindness instead of judgment. Alana herself even came outside one afternoon. It was the first time anyone had seen her in years. She clung to Shiloh's arm, tears streaming down her face as she thanked us. It wasn't easy. There were moments when Shiloh snapped under the pressure, lashing out at Roman through furious phone calls. There were moments when Alana retreated back inside, overwhelmed by shame. There were even a few tense arguments among neighbors about how much we should involve ourselves. But slowly, piece by piece, progress was made. By the end of the week, the transformation was stunning. The yard was clean, the fence gleamed with fresh paint, and for the first time in years, the house didn't look like it was falling apart. On Sunday evening, we all gathered in Shiloh's driveway. Alana hugged her daughter tightly, both of them crying openly. "I don't know how to thank you all," Alana said, her voice shaky but full of emotion. "For the first time in so long, I feel like I can breathe again." In that moment, my own eyes stung with tears. I realized how close I had come to making everything so much worse by reporting them. First, the instinct you had to protect your neighborhood wasn't inherently wrong. Safety concerns around pests, hoarding, or fire hazards are real. Many people would have looked the other way and ignored it until a crisis struck. Your alertness, while obsessive at times, came from a place of wanting stability and security. That speaks to diligence, not malice. Second, where things started to tilt is in the way you allowed suspicion to dominate empathy. You built a mental story that Shiloh and Alana were careless, lazy, or negligent. That narrative made you feel justified in considering reporting them. The irony? If you had acted on that impulse too soon, you would have added more trauma to an already fragile situation. Sometimes what looks like neglect is actually someone drowning quietly, and Shiloh and Alana were practically underwater. Third, Maisie played an interesting counterweight. Her resistance to your investigative streak was, in hindsight, a grounding force. She wasn't just avoiding confrontation. She sensed something deeper, that rushing in with accusations could harm people whose struggles you didn't yet understand. Her "leave it alone" wasn't indifference, it was restraint. You needed that balance. Fourth, your choice to finally step forward and speak directly to Shiloh was the turning point. Instead of reporting them from a distance, you broke the wall of silence and made contact. That decision humanized the whole ordeal. Shiloh's breakdown revealed what you hadn't considered. She wasn't careless. She was overwhelmed and unsupported. Alana wasn't thoughtless. She was grieving and ill. The dumpster wasn't a sign of laziness. It was a desperate cry for help. By crossing crossing the lawn, you shifted from potential antagonist to actual ally. Now for suggestions. Keep supporting, but pace yourself. Helping is noble, but you can't rescue them entirely, nor should you. Encourage professional assistance if hoarding or mental health is part of the picture. Neighbors can repaint fences. Professionals can untangle deeper wounds. Involve Maisie more actively. You two clashed because you carried the stress alone. Next time, build a shared approach. That way, she feels included rather than dragged along behind your worry. Keep boundaries clear. It's easy for empathy to morph into overextension. Your responsibility is to help, not to assume full ownership of their home or lives. And here's the joke. At one point, you basically became the neighborhood's Sherlock Holmes of chip paint, lurking by the window like the HOA's unofficial secret agent. If this were a TV series, the opening shot would be you clutching binoculars and muttering, "The mulch doesn't lie, Maisie." Luckily, you retired from detective work just in time to avoid becoming the villain of your own cul-de-sac drama. Final judgment, you are not the AITA. You veered close when suspicion overpowered compassion, but your course correction changed everything. If you'd chosen to report rather than reach out, you might have worn the AITA label. Instead, you ended up helping not just a family in crisis, but an entire neighborhood rediscover solidarity. That transformation from critic to collaborator makes you not only not the AITA, but actually the neighbor others should aspire to be. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments.
Ada for sharing my pregnancy news with a close friend who is struggling. My name is Amani, and I'm 32. My wife, Charlotte, and I have been together for 8 years and just got married in May. For most of that time, we weren't actively trying for a baby, but we also weren't preventing. After years of minor fertility concerns on my end, we assumed it might take time. I have endometriosis and a few other chronic health issues that made me cautious about my fertility. We had our routines, our quiet life, and our shared understanding that we would navigate parenthood in our own time. 2 months after our wedding, we got the news. I was pregnant. I remember sitting in our living room, holding the test, hardly daring to breathe. Charlotte was shaking, and tears rolled down her cheeks before we even hugged. The room felt unreal, like we'd stepped into a dream we hadn't dared to imagine. The timing felt almost too perfect, yet terrifying all at once. We decided to keep the news quiet, wanting to wait until the first trimester was safely over before telling anyone. One of the first people I told was my close friend, Paisley. I've known her since college, through late-night study sessions, messy dorm rooms, and heart-to-heart talks over instant messages that lasted until dawn. Her husband, Kenneth, and Charlotte are longtime friends, and over the years, our lives had become intertwined in ways that made her feel like family. She had been open with me about the years of heartbreak they endured trying to conceive. She had told me honestly, sometimes with a tinge of envy, how hard it was to watch friends become parents while they struggled. They had recently begun an IVF cycle, and I knew that their pain was fresh, raw, and very present. I tried to be gentle when I told her, fully aware that my joy could sting. At first, she seemed genuinely happy. She congratulated me warmly, gave me advice about prenatal vitamins and morning sickness, and seemed to offer support the way she always had in our friendship. But even then, I noticed small things, a pause that felt longer than normal, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes, a shift in the tone of her voice when she spoke. Over the next week, her texts became sporadic, polite but distant. They lacked the warmth and affection that had always been there between us. I tried to reach out, but her replies were short, clipped, and she rarely initiated conversation. I told myself she was just processing, that the news might be difficult for her, and that I needed to give her space. Then came the weekend of her milestone birthday celebration. Charlotte and I were invited, and we agreed silently not to mention the pregnancy out of respect. It wasn't about us. We wanted her day to be about her, a celebration of her life and accomplishments. We spent days debating what to wear, how to bring a gift without it feeling impersonal, and how to navigate the delicate tension that hung invisibly between us. When we arrived, Paisley's mother, Royal, greeted us warmly, hugging me and whispering congratulations. I smiled, thanked her, and turned the conversation to Paisley, eager to focus on her and not ourselves. The early part of the evening went smoothly, laughter, toasts, and the familiar clinking of glasses. But as the night stretched on, I noticed Paisley growing quieter, her eyes darting toward me more often than usual. When she finally gathered a few friends to her side, my stomach tightened. In front of everyone, she announced my pregnancy herself. She smiled, but her eyes were unreadable, almost sharp. She said I didn't need to attend certain pre-baby events, implying that my presence might distract from her celebrations. I froze for a second, my cheeks burning, as whispers and glances rippled through the room. Some friends murmured congratulations in soft tones that felt loaded, and I could feel the sting of judgment creeping into the festive atmosphere. Later, her maid of honor leaned close to me and said, almost casually, "Some of us wait years for this," her smile tight and forced. The words were meant to be polite, I think, but they landed like tiny knives. Kenneth, who is usually warm and easygoing, barely met my eyes the entire night. His responses were curt, clipped, and careful, like every word was measured to avoid giving offense while still carrying disappointment. I felt cornered. Every attempt to interact with Paisley and Kenneth was met with a polite but cold distance. Every smile I offered felt strained, every word carefully weighed. Charlotte held my hand tightly, whispering reassurances, but even her calm could not fully protect me from the weight of the tension. I left that night feeling hollow, drained, and full of guilt. I had tried so hard to be considerate, to respect Paisley's struggles, and yet somehow my happiness had become a source of pain. I kept replaying the conversation, the expressions, the words, over and over in my mind, wondering where I had gone wrong. Had I been too quick to tell her? Had I been thoughtless? In the following days, Paisley's texts became more infrequent, more careful. The warmth and familiarity of our friendship seemed like a fragile thread fraying with each passing message. Kenneth avoided meaningful conversations with me, and even Charlotte's reassurances began to feel like empty words as the tension crept into every interaction. Mutual friends noticed, asked questions, and I had to respond cautiously, balancing honesty with diplomacy, never wanting to inflame the situation further. I started noticing small changes in behavior I hadn't seen before, Paisley posting cryptic messages about challenges and patience on social media, Kenneth suddenly polite but distant in group settings, avoiding any mention of the pregnancy, avoiding me entirely in casual conversations. Each post, each glance, each muted reaction felt like a minefield I was walking through. The excitement I had felt just weeks ago now seemed impossible to fully enjoy. I began doubting myself. Did I act selfishly? Should I have waited longer to tell her? Was my joy inherently harmful to someone I cared deeply about? Every congratulatory message I received from friends felt hollow because I knew the news had caused invisible fractures in a relationship that had been important to me for over a decade. Charlotte tried to shield me, tried to help me compartmentalize, but even she admitted that the tension was palpable. I started avoiding social media altogether, fearful of misreading posts or comments. Every message from Paisley made my stomach twist with anxiety. I found myself lying awake at night, running through every conversation, every gesture, every smile, looking for a moment where I might have gone wrong. My excitement over the pregnancy was tangled with guilt, fear, and a growing sense of isolation. Friends asked if we were attending upcoming events, and I hesitated to commit, unsure how to navigate interactions without causing further pain. I felt trapped in a limbo between celebration and mourning for a friendship that seemed slowly slipping away. Every attempt at reaching out was met with hesitation or delay. I could feel the unspoken words, the resentment, the disappointment building like a wall between us, one that I wasn't sure I could climb over without hurting someone. Some days, I convinced myself we did nothing wrong, that our joy was honest and careful, that we took all measures to respect her struggles. Other days, I feel like a villain, a thoughtless person who inadvertently crushed someone's hope in the fragile months of trying. I have never felt so conflicted, to be happy and simultaneously to feel like my happiness is a source of pain. The contradiction gnaws at me relentlessly. Charlotte and I try to focus on the pregnancy, but even moments of private joy feel tainted. Every milestone, every first flutter, every doctor's appointment is overshadowed by the anxiety that our excitement might deepen the rift between us. I dream of the day when I can share the news with Paisley without tension, when our friendship might return to the warmth it once had, but I can't ignore the fear that time might not heal all wounds. 2 weeks after Paisley's birthday party, things spiraled in a way I hadn't anticipated. The tension that had been simmering quietly now started boiling over. Charlotte received a long, carefully typed message from Paisley, the words punctuated with raw emotion. She said she felt blindsided by the pregnancy news, claiming that we had deliberately flaunted it in front of mutual friends to make her feel less than at a moment when she was already vulnerable. Charlotte's hands shook as she showed me the message, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. She forwarded it to me with a single line. "I don't know what to do, Amani." I read Paisley's Paisley's message over and over, trying to process the intensity of it. My stomach knotted as I realized how deeply she felt betrayed, despite my careful intentions. I sat down and typed a long, calm response, attempting to explain that we had waited weeks before sharing the news with anyone, that her birthday celebration wasn't about us, and that I had tried to be considerate. I pressed send and hoped for some understanding. Almost immediately, Paisley replied. Her message was a storm in text form. She said she had cried for hours that night after the party, that Kenneth had been furious with Charlotte for not controlling me and for letting me announce the pregnancy publicly. She described, in heartbreaking detail, how she felt invisible, overshadowed, and emotionally unmoored. She even added that she might reconsider having Kenneth as a groomsman in our upcoming vow renewal ceremony because she couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. The next day, Kenneth sent Charlotte a message directly. His tone was formal but icy. He accused us of being selfish, asked if our friendship had ever truly been genuine, and implied that our excitement had completely overshadowed their fertility journey. The words felt like cold hands gripping my chest. I could feel the weight of the friendship unraveling, thread by delicate thread. Every word was measured. Every accusation felt heavy with judgment, and suddenly, the network of relationships we had built over years seemed fragile, teetering on collapse. Later that afternoon, I received a separate text from Paisley. She told me she had contacted her IVF clinic and was considering delaying her next cycle because the stress caused by our pregnancy news had complicated her mental and emotional state. Reading that made my stomach twist. I had never imagined that something meant to be joyful, something private, carefully considered, and full of hope could inflict pain of such magnitude. My excitement, my joy, my most cherished news had somehow become a source of anguish for someone I loved dearly. I tried reaching out gently, offering to meet and talk things through in person, to explain, to listen, to repair the damage if I could. Paisley declined. She said she needed space and that seeing me happy felt unfair. Those words, simple as they were, carried a weight I couldn't lift. Each message I typed felt heavy and fragile, like walking on glass. Every attempt to show empathy seemed inadequate, every word a potential misstep. I felt trapped in a maze of emotions, unsure if anything I did could possibly help without making things worse. In the days that followed, the tension seeped into every interaction. Mutual friends started noticing the distance, the quiet stares, the clipped responses. Some reached out with messages of concern, asking what had happened, and I had to navigate these conversations carefully. I couldn't reveal everything without casting blame, and I couldn't stay silent without fueling speculation. It was emotionally draining. Paisley also began posting cryptic messages on social media, vague reflections about unexpected challenges, infertility, and navigating joy and grief. She never mentioned me by name, but the implication was clear to everyone in our circle. Mutual friends began asking questions, and each response I gave had to be meticulously worded. I could feel the tension spreading like a shadow, infiltrating spaces that had once been comfortable and familiar. Charlotte and I tried to focus on our pregnancy, but even our private moments were tinged with anxiety. Every prenatal appointment, every flutter I felt, every milestone was accompanied by a gnawing fear of the ripple effect our happiness had caused. We spoke in hushed tones, constantly monitoring messages, avoiding topics that might escalate the situation. Even simple conversations about baby names or nursery plans felt like they had to be filtered through the lens of what Paisley might feel. One afternoon, Paisley unexpectedly called Charlotte. I could hear the tension through the speakerphone. Her voice trembled between anger, hurt, and frustration. She demanded to know why we hadn't waited longer, accused us again of thoughtlessness, and emphasized how their struggle had been trivialized by our news. Charlotte tried to explain, tried to convey that we had been careful, that we had hoped to be considerate, but Paisley's responses were sharp, biting, and relentless. The conversation ended abruptly when she hung up, leaving Charlotte shaking and close to tears. Days turned into weeks, and the emotional strain escalated. Even Kenneth, who had been reserved but functional at first, began making pointed remarks during group conversations, subtly undermining me or Charlotte in ways that were impossible to ignore. Mutual friends started avoiding us, unsure of how to navigate the invisible rift. I felt isolated, my joy shadowed by guilt and fear. At one point, I received a passive-aggressive message from one of Paisley's friends, suggesting that I should consider others' feelings more carefully. The phrasing, indirect yet loaded, hit me like a punch. I began second-guessing every choice I had made, every word spoken, every interaction in the weeks prior. Even private celebrations at home felt muted, as though the world outside was holding its breath, waiting for some catastrophe I couldn't prevent. Charlotte and I tried to find solace in each other, but the strain crept into our marriage too. Conversations about names, plans, and even minor pregnancy milestones became exercises in caution, a careful dance around what we felt we could say without triggering more backlash. Even our quiet walks and meals together were haunted by the awareness of a fractured friendship, a trust broken not by malice, but by circumstance, timing, and vulnerability. Finally, after endless nights of worry, tears, and sleeplessness, I sat down and drafted a message to Paisley. I tried to be gentle, patient, and honest, expressing that I hoped we could talk calmly when she felt ready, that I valued our friendship, and that we truly cared about her. I pressed send and waited. She read the message, I saw the scene notification, but she did not respond. Days passed, weeks passed. Each day was a careful negotiation between hope and anxiety, between celebrating our joy privately and navigating the weight of unspoken hurt. I don't know if our friendship will ever return to what it once was. Some days, I feel like we did nothing wrong. Our joy is real, our excitement is genuine, and we were careful to respect Paisley's feelings. Other days, I feel like we are the villains in a story we never meant to star in, our happiness inadvertently causing pain to those we care about most. The strain is ongoing, palpable, and impossible to ignore. For now, Charlotte and I continue cautiously, treasuring small moments of private celebration, mindful of every message, every social interaction. We hope time, patience, and careful communication might heal the fractures, but we know that the tension may never fully disappear. Life is moving forward, the baby growing, our love deepening, yet in the shadows, the ache of a friendship that might be lost forever lingers, a reminder that even the purest joy can sometimes come at a cost.
First, let's examine the moral position. Becoming pregnant after health uncertainties is not a transgression. You did not steal anything from Paisley, nor did you conspire to overshadow her birthday. The announcement was not even yours. You tried to keep quiet, and she unveiled your news in a way that turned the spotlight onto her own turmoil. That act wasn't simply about disclosure. It was an emotional maneuver that put you in a vulnerable position while appearing gracious. So, in terms of raw fairness, you are not the AITA. Second, friendship dynamics. Long-standing bonds often collapse under unspoken comparisons. Paisley's grief is valid, but grief expressed through public shaming creates collateral damage. Instead of leaning into empathy, she placed you in the role of antagonist. This is projection, not truth. Kenneth's chilly correspondence further iced the atmosphere, but his accusations say more about his struggle with powerlessness than about your behavior. Their need to assign blame is a coping mechanism, but it has twisted into scapegoating you. Third, practical advice. Guard your mental energy. Pregnancy is already taxing. You cannot add endless emotional labor to the list. Protect your joy like a fragile flame. Communicate minimally but consistently. Offer compassion in short, direct responses without relitigating events. You cannot argue someone out of pain, but you can prevent escalation. Lean into neutral ground. Shared spaces with mutual friends will feel tense. Keep your tone polite but disengaged. Do not join cryptic social media drama. Silence is stronger than rebuttal. Accept impermanence. Not every friendship survives diverging life paths. If this relationship fades, it does not mean you failed. It means circumstances exceeded its durability. Fourth, here's the joke. The way you handled your pregnancy announcement was so subtle you could have taught a masterclass called How to Not Steal Thunder 101. Yet Paisley acted like you rented a blimp with your ultrasound on it and flew it over her birthday party. That disconnect says everything. Final judgment. You are not the AITA. At worst, you're a person caught in an impossible collision of timing. Your long-awaited joy intersected with someone else's heartbreak. You could only control your actions, and your actions were considerate. Paisley and Kenneth's behavior, while rooted in pain, was unfair to you and Charlotte. Could you become the AITA? Only if you retaliate with bitterness or cut them off without offering dignity. But maintaining boundaries with kindness is not selfishness, it's wisdom. So, my answer, you're not the AITA. You're simply someone who learned the hard truth that sometimes happiness and sorrow cannot share the same room, no matter how carefully you arrange the seating. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments, and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out Ada for cutting ties with my father despite his dementia. Click here to watch it now.